been asked to I've been asked to keep this to at a very basic sort of level, so that I know that some of you may have experience of bibliometrics. If you do, please share them with the group. Thank you very much to EIFL, the wonderful organization who is responsible for bringing these webinars to us. I've learned a lot about social media last week, so it's been great. So I'm going to ask you some questions along the way, so I'd be really grateful if you could add in the responses in the chat, and we can follow up on them later on in the session. So I'm just going to share my screen here, and this is our introduction to bibliometrics. Okay. So this is part of the EIFL Digital Research Literacy Training online, and the introduction to bibliometrics says that by the end of this training, learners should know how to use metrics appropriately, if you don't know that already. And today we're going to look at what bibliometrics are, the uses and misuses of bibliometrics, author level and article level metrics and tools. Is focusing on Scopus, Web of Science, Google Scholar, altmetric.com, and looking at a few others, and looking at choosing appropriate metrics, how you go about choosing them. So because we've got a fairly short time period today, I've provided some information at the very end of the slide deck, which I will share with you through Irena. Irena will circulate it later on. So that's on. Some of you will be already giving training sessions, maybe to colleagues or to members of your research staff, or perhaps leaders in your institution. So I'm providing some exercises that you could offer as part of that training. And because we won't have time to go into the tools in a huge amount of detail, I've got a separate slide deck that just provides some interesting screenshots from the different tools that we'll be discussing. So those will all be available to you after the session. Okay, so we'll just move forward on this. Of course, as part of the EIFL Digital Research Literacy Training Outline, there are a set of wonderful resources for workshop facilitators and for learners. And you'll see them here for the, so that I've provided the link is available through the session. You'll see there's entire online courses on bibliometric basis. There's a whole lot of LibGuides, some of them from University College Dublin, which is another university in Dublin, not the one I come from, but a different one. And there's an excellent example of a presentation or training slides from Michelle Dalton from University College Dublin called Bibliometrics for Beginners. And it's really excellent, so do check it out. I've also included a couple of additional resources here. So one of them is the metrics toolkit. So that's, you know, the go-to independently created and CC by licensed resource that's updated on a regular basis by a wonderful group of volunteers, and that goes through each of the metrics. And we'll look at some of that later on. I've also included the 2013 Spark article level metrics, a primer. So that's a link to that as well. So to look at those metrics. So we'll start off with the basics. What are bibliometrics? And I'm sure you already know this, but let's take a look at them anyway. So you probably even know who this guy is. This is Eugene Garfield. And he was the founder of the fields of scientometrics. That's the quantitative study of science and technology, and bibliometrics. So Eugene Garfield introduced the citation as a qualitative measure of academic impact. And from it, these concepts of citation indexing and citation linking. Nobody thought about doing this before. And Eugene Garfield was really surprised at how it took off. And actually, he wasn't always delighted to see how his metrics were being used. He said, I had always envisaged a time when scholars would become citation conscious. And to a large extent they have, for information retrieval, evaluation and measuring impact. But he went on to say, I did not imagine that the worldwide scholarly enterprise would grow to its present size, or that bibliometrics would become so widespread. So the creator was really surprised at what he created was a worldwide industry of enormous databases that are all linked. So bibliometrics is defined as the statistical analysis of books, articles, or other publications and their citations. And they include a wide and ever-increasing group of indicators, some examples of which I provided here. The author-level indicators, such as the H-index or the Hirsch index. The article or publication-level indicators, like the number of papers and citations, etc. The normalized cite indicators, we'll have a look at those in a little bit later, like the field normalized citation impact. Journal level indicators like the journal impact factor that is highly controversial at the moment, and collaboration indicators like countries of co-authorship collaborators. Those latter ones are really very important, increasingly important. I don't know if any of you saw the recent webinar that the Times Higher Education ran on rankings for societal impact. And they had a senior researcher and officer in Massachusetts Institute of Technology who said that MIT is focusing on collaborations information. So, which is really interesting, collaborations information and the attainment of their postgraduates. So that was actually quite an interesting thing for me to hear. It's really important to always remember that many of the sources, or at least the traditional sources of bibliometric information, are proprietary commercial databases that have well-known issues of access and incomplete coverage, especially for arts, humanities, and social sciences. And I'm sure many of you are very aware of this, they have built-in geographical and linguistic biases. Right? So you have to provide this kind of health warning every time, certainly any time that I'm producing a report, a bibliometric report. Somewhere down at the bottom are, terms and conditions apply, like the banks say, and this is the caveats. Arts and humanities are only covered to about 25% of their research outputs are covered. Social sciences, maybe 33%. Books and book chapters, really, they're not really covered at all, An example of one of our senior researchers in my institution in Trinity College Dublin has 128 publications listed in her institutional profile. Excuse me. Only 21 of her publications are indexed in Scopus, and she's a historian. So that's for a very serious situation. So if we just reported that without indicating or giving a clear idea of these coverage issues, we'd be giving a false impression. So that's a really important thing that we have to guard against. Oops, sorry. Just a moment. So moving on from this one then, the uses and abuses of bibliometrics. So bibliometrics, as you know, are often used in research evaluation. They can be used for strategic planning to inform an institution or a school or department or even an individual about how they're doing or where they think they're doing compared with others in their area and, where they think they might go. It can also produce key performance indicators that at the institutional or the national level, it could be used, they can be added to quality reviews, departmental reviews, accreditation reviews, reviews for government agencies, annual reports. They're often included in research grant proposals. Academics, individual researchers you'll often see them on CVs. All you have to do is Google academic curriculum vitae and you'll see bibliometric information appearing for an individual on examples of those. They can be used for applications for memberships of academies and other professional bodies, for funder or national analyses, like a research prioritization exercise. I did this for my country, for Ireland. We use bibliometric indicators to look at how effective our funding had been in particular areas. They can be used, rightly or wrongly, for recruitment. Note, I'm not recommending these, I'm just stating that this is what they're used for. And they can be used for university rankings. So we have a look at some of these. Some of the examples of how rankings use metrics are, the Times Higher Education is the THE. So they will count papers per academic staff. They also count citations per paper. And so does the Shanghai rankings, and so does the QS rankings. For both its subject and its main rankings. The QS subject ranking counts the H index as well. Times Higher Education counts percentages of papers with international collaborations and percentages of papers with industry collaborations using Scopus a bibliometric tool as a source of that information. And then separately and outside the bibliometric area, they'll all use reputation indicators. Well, at least Times and QS will use, Times Higher and QS will use that. Shanghai use purely bibliometric indicators for their rankings. So you can see how important and how Eugene Garfield was right in being amazed at how bibliometrics have really taken over and have become very, very influential. The abuses of bibliometrics. Jonathan Adams said that bibliometrics has a problem. He wrote it in Nature, in Bibliometrics, the citation game. He said the problem is the field that tracks scholarly impact in everything from journal papers to citations and data sets and tweets has a lot of problems. Its indicators need better interpretation. Its tools are widely misused. Its relevance is often questioned, and its analyses lack timeliness. So there's often a time lag. They're based on publications that were published at least 18 months ago and probably a lot further back. So they're not really up to date. He talked about the careless use of bibliometrics. That's something we're not going to be guilty of. We're going to use bibliometrics with care. He mentioned the H index, that it's innately flawed because it's not responsible for field or career stages. He says impact factors tell us about journals, not individual publications, but research managers incorrectly use journal impact factors as an indicator of quality and use it to recruit staff. I'm going to say that's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Engineers publish conference papers, but submit journal papers for assessment. So the conference papers aren't properly covered. There's a long tail on mathematicians and arts and humanities researchers, of course. And there's completely different ways of authorship assignment in between economists and particle physics. Very few of the users of bibliometrics appreciate the implications of these nuances, but I know that you will because a lot of you come from library backgrounds, so you're good with this kind of thing. So they need to be used in a particular way. There's been a strong impetus for change. So that momentum has been seen in DORA, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, the Leiden Manifesto, the Vienna Principles, the Metric Tide, that was the UK report. We saw some of it coming in the Bratislava Declaration of Young Researchers and on the Hong Kong Manifesto for Assessing Researchers. So just to remind you of some of these, DORA said, do not use journal-based metrics. They're talking specifically about journal impact factors as a surrogate measure of the quality of individual research articles. So, or to assess an individual scientist's contributions. Right. So they're saying clearly don't do that. And many institutions, funders and individual authors have signed up for DORA. The Leiden Principles, similarly, when you go down at the bottom of it, it says, avoid misplaced concreteness and false precision, recognize the systemic effects of assessment and indicators, scrutinize indicators regularly and update them. So again, looking for balance and clarity and transparency in the use of indicators. The Vienna Principles, in section 9 of them, they say evaluation influences the perceived impact of research results of researchers, journals, or institutions, and therefore the very way that scientific knowledge is produced. And that's why it's essential that those evaluation processes are conducted fairly and adequately. And they go on to discuss those and the reward structures that are linked to evaluation. So these are all relevant to what we're doing. And then the Metric Tide was very UK focused. But do read it, it was produced by, edited and chaired by Professor James Wilsden. And they found a skepticism about the broader use of metrics in research assessment and management, and that peer review flaws and all command widespread support and attention. But they also saw the value or the uses of indicators, because it's even though it's not feasible to use them as an overall indicator, that they have their place. So the metrics tide came up with this concept of responsible metrics, and you see a lot of funders using this terminology, and you can use this too and promote it as well. That's based on the principles that the metrics tide came up, principles of robustness, of humility, knowing that this is not the final word, of transparency, making sure that the processes and the analytical processes and the data collection are transparent, So you should always show your methodology. You should list what your methodology is and the caveats I mentioned. Diversity, to account for variation by field and use a range of indicators to support this plurality of research and research career paths. And this idea of reflexivity, recognizing and trying to anticipate the effects of the indicators and trying to keep them up to date. So this is always something that's dynamic and moving all along. So that's what we have to sign up for, as well as the use of responsible metrics before we proceed into talking about bibliometrics. So I hope we're all agreed on that. Of course, the European Commission has indicated their concern about this by making 2 of the 8 pillars of open science about research indicators and next generation metrics and rewards and incentives. So both of them are worth checking out to make sure that we're keeping with what these good principles are in our use. So here are the basics of bibliometrics. Here they are. The rules, if you've done any of my workshops before, you'll have seen these before. You know these already. Never compare bibliometric data across fields or disciplines. Always use a range of metrics, not just one. Try to balance quantitative data with qualitative data, including ideally peer review. And that's really important for those disciplines that are poorly served by bibliometric information. Arts, humanities, and social sciences, but also engineering, technology, computer science, and some others. Be sure to identify your data sources, parameters, and methodology. And it's okay to mix your data sources. In fact, it's probably a really good idea to do that. Researchers should be made aware of the ways in which they are evaluated and the means in which they can improve their results. And we should always remember to add a caveat to our reports, as I mentioned already, highlighting the issues with the coverage and the other flaws with bibliometric tools, right? So, and say that this should just be one part of an analysis. You need to do more than this. The commonly used metrics are, we've mentioned already, author level metrics, article level metrics, and we're going to say a quick word about that infamous journal impact factor. So, but first, getting familiar with metrics, the examples of the commonly used personal metrics will be the number of publications, usually qualified by peer-reviewed or non-peer-reviewed, sometimes qualified by the role. Are you the senior authorship, or where are you in a senior author in it? The number of citations, the average number of citations per paper, the field normalized or field weighted citation impact, the H-index, collaborations in terms of authorship, co-authorship, and that is often broken down into international collaborations and national collaborations. You can also go into patent or patent applications and licenses and patent or patent citations. So again, check out the metrics toolkit. Here's the link to it again that will explain a lot of these metrics. Author level metrics are citation metrics that measure the bibliometric impact of individual authors, researchers, academics, and scholars. And they can be used to allocate resources like funding or for academic appointments. There remains controversy in the academic community as to how well author level metrics achieve this goal. So, but there's controversy about every single part of research evaluation. It's important for us to be aware of those controversies and discussions, but it shouldn't put us off engaging in this area and trying to be fair and provide really good, the best reports we can in this area. So examples of the author level metrics are, as I've said, number of publications, citation per paper, H-index, field weighted citation impact, etc. So here's some examples of some of the most common ones like that. So the H-index, many of you will know this already. It was, it means the number of articles, which would be represented by H by an author, that have been cited at least H number of times. And the example given is that a researcher with a H-index of 16 has published 16 articles that have been cited at least 16 times each. So that researcher might have published 120 articles, but maybe many of them have received no citations, or maybe just 14 or 12 citations or 3 citations. This has the highest, this cross-references the number of publications, highest number of publications with the highest number of citations, and produces that as the H-index. The field-weighted citation impact comes from Scopus and from SciVal, and that's the ratio of citations received relative to the expected world average, and that is usually field weighted or normalized for the field. So they find what the world average citations will be for any given year. So it's going to be normalized for a year. It'll be normalized for the field as well. So it'll be based on the average for the field that is discovered in SciVal. And it's usually also normalized for publication type, so for journal articles. So it'll find the field weighted citation impact of 1 indicates the expected global average has been received. Anything more than 1 indicates the expected global average has been exceeded. So if your field weighted citation impact is 2, that means you have doubled the world expected average citations. And that's a really good thing to report. 1.5 will be you've achieved 50% higher than the world average expected citations. The Web of Science and Clarivate Analytics provides something very similar in their analytics program Insights. And they calculate their category normalized citation impact. It's very similar to the field weighted citation impact, and that is calculated by dividing the actual count of citing items by the expected citation rate for documents with the same document type, year of publication, and subject area. And exactly the same thing, the value of 1 is the word average. Anything you get over 1 is better than the word average. Then you have citations per paper, which is cruder. It's not normalized in any way. It's simply your average number of citations per paper. And some people are looking at things like the eigenfactor. We're not going to go into those in detail today. We don't have time. That's a weighted measure that's based on author citations, on an author citation excluding self-citation. And that adjusts for the number of authors of the paper, the number of outgoing citations from each paper is citing an author's paper, and the importance of the citing paper. So it's reported in SSRN, and it's also reported in a number of other rankings that we'll have a look at in a moment. So this is an example from the metrics toolkit, and so you can go in and look up any of these indicators. I've looked up the H-index, and this is what the H-index says. So this is really going to help you to choose the appropriate indicators. It tells you what the definition of the H-index is. It'll tell you where it came from, and it'll give you the data source where you find it. It'll tell you where the appropriate use cases are, not just for the H-index, for any of the indicators that they use. It tells you about the limitations of it, and it tells you about inappropriate use cases. So for example, it gives you appropriate uses. So for example, evidence of the scholarly influence of an author or a group of authors' body of work, best used in conjunction with other metrics. It says it should not be used as a sole metric of scholarly impact or as a direct measure of quality, right? Or used for different disciplines. So this is why the metrics toolkit is a really excellent guide to help you to choose your metrics and to define them. Here's another example from the metrics toolkit on field weighted citation impact. So you can go in and have a look at this for yourself. The link is on the other page. And again, you'll see the definition, how it's calculated, where you could find this information, the appropriate use cases, the limitations, and the inappropriate use cases. So for example, under the inappropriate use cases, it says, like for most citation analyses, citation-based metrics should not be interpreted as a direct measure of research quality. So they're just proxies, and you put a whole bunch of them together, and if they're all pointing in the same direction, you can draw a conclusion that it looks as if this is something that you're dealing with, something that's good or above the world average at least. So other author metrics that are worth taking a look at are Publons, for example, which you know about, which is a free tool from Clarivate Analytics and provides profiles and data for and about researchers. It's great for early career researchers, as are altmetrics. So we'll be looking at those now. So these are not traditional metrics. These are non-traditional metrics, but they're starting to come in. So just as research evaluation is being challenged in many ways, new metrics are coming in to not really replace bibliometrics as yet, but to complement them in many ways. So look up your own institution or your favorite authors, or even yourself, under Publons and check out the metrics on that. And you can certainly include this in your training sessions for your researchers on research evaluation, as this allows the actual reviews to be taken into account and that research activity. This is what my institution, Trinity College, looks like it's telling us it's the second in Ireland, and that by various different metrics. under this, under Publon's ranking of reviewers. So as I say, take a look at that yourself. You'll be familiar from your open science work on open science metrics. Impact Story is an excellent source of information for individual researchers on their open science metrics, and go ahead and have a look at that. On the article level metrics, Spark's primer in article level metrics said that article level metrics focuses on usage, captures, mentions, social media, and citations. So these article level metrics are recommended by DORA and by most reviews of research evaluation who are making recommendations about how to reform research evaluation. They're calling for author level metrics and article level metrics. So we're looking at metrics at these levels. And not at the level of the journal. There are a number of sources of article level metrics, and altmetrics are one of them. So you'll see similar sources of article level metrics in PLOS One, for example, and other open access journals. So you can report on those, and you can aggregate article level metrics for a group, for example, or for an author and themselves. I mentioned Altmetrics, and the Altmetric donut, the altmetric.com donut, is available, freely and can be embedded in your repositories, so you can start to see what the article level metrics are available in terms of Altmetrics, the news stories, the tweets, the blogs, and so on. PlumX is another one that isn't freely available, but the widget for PlumX is available for free on individual articles. Altmetrics.com provide a bookmarklet, so you can go and check the Altmetrics as you're searching. So you can check out the altmetric.com website for a whole range of training materials associated with Altmetrics. But looking at it here, we've got the this is just a view of a particular journal article. It's got quite a high number of an Altmetrics score. We can see the news outlets and so on. And we're using Altmetrics in data to complement the classic or traditional bibliometric data now in research grant proposals. When you're teaching bibliometrics and altmetrics to complement it, you can ask your learners to analyze one of the free altmetric donuts for a selected publication and to examine the Twitter mentions, the blog mentions, and then based on that, you could ask them to create an impact strategy based on their analysis. Because Twitter was going to show you who in the world is tweeting about the particular work you're looking up, and you can break it down into looking at members of the public, at practitioners, at scientists and science communicators. So it's not just an indicator of the impact that a work has had, it's going to inform you about potential impact and how to grow it. So that's how altmetrics are very, very useful. And there's an example of the attention that has come in from the tweets from various different people. So obviously you need to go and follow some of those people. Attracting attention to your work, you'll have these slides afterwards. You can write a lay summary of your work. You can use this in your workshops. Make sure that your ORCID ID is on your profile, and above all, make your work open access to make sure that the altmetric sources can track your work and report on it. And also be really sure to ensure that you include your researchers in unique identifier, a DOI, archive ID, PubMed ID, if you're using Altmetrics as a researcher, or if you're training researchers to inform researchers to be sure and make sure this information is included in any tweets, social media, and news stories. And also try and work with altmetric.com, PlumX, and the equivalent services to make sure that the sources that your researchers are interested in and that they work with, that they publish in, are actually tracked by these sources. So that's really important. If they're not covering it, if they're not tracking the information, it's just the same as the Web of Science and Scopus. The coverage can provide issues, and you're going to have exactly the same problems with these new altmetric sources. So don't forget to use the digital object identifiers, as I've mentioned already. So if your work hasn't been assigned by a DOI, go and contact the publisher and request one to make sure it's got one in order to use it. Finally, I was going to mention on this section of the metrics themselves, there's the Open Science Career Assessment Matrix produced by the European Commission Open Science Policy Platform. And that's led to the Open Science Rewards and Incentives Registry Initiative, which you can look up. But open science metrics, usually those are article level metrics of a particular kind. And it's very valuable if you possibly can to track the usage, the hits and downloads of open access publications, especially paying attention to the use from other universities, from other countries, from government departments, NGOs, industry, schools, citizen scientists and the public. You can use Google Analytics and some other tools to try and track your open science metrics, and don't forget about impact story as well for that. Okay. So those are article level metrics. A quick word on the journal impact factor. So just go into this here. So as the journal level metric, the journal impact factor should not be used as an indicator for the quality or impact of particular articles or journals. And I can't stress that strongly enough. That is something that DORA has come out strongly against, but I know that you as librarians or as bibliometric analysts, that you're often asked for this information. I think it's really important for us to try and to alert our community gently in some ways, because some senior researchers are really attached to the journal impact factor. We have to try and put together information about why it shouldn't be used and inform them about the San Francisco Declaration, that it has become deprecated. It's not a good indicator of whether an individual article will be highly cited either. So it can actually end up harming people's and institutions' research impact. So, and that the metrics toolkit will give you a lot more information about this as well. So moving on to the bibliometric tool, there's a whole confusing array of tools that are available, and some of them not so available because some of them are subscription only. So let's take a look at some of them. This is the landscape that we're looking at, is the overall research evaluation landscape. And this is where the citation metrics fit into it. I've put the green ones, the ones that are in green, that's like a traffic light, is that they're available for free, or there's a version that's for free, right? And so you'll see them, and the other ones are commercial, but they fit in with this other landscape that we have available to us here. The first and the most famous and the original, the father of them all, was the Web of Science from Clarivate Analytics, an abstract and indexing database. It's a curated database focused on quality. It has coverage issues associated for particular disciplines that we've mentioned already, and we can use it to perform basic analyses of researchers' outputs and to find metrics like the H-index, overall citations and publications, and so on. And there's a facility to export lists of publications and citations. Further analyses are supported. So you can click on the analysis button on the analyze button on the search results, and you can then look at collaborating countries and institutions, etc. They also have an add-on called Insights, which is a benchmarking and deeper analysis tool based on Web of Science data. And of course, it requires another subscription. Scopus is pretty much the same, except it comes from our friends over in Elsevier. So again, an abstracting and indexing database. It's curated. It's again focused on quality. It has similar coverage issues, despite many claims. The Web of Science and Scopus have quite similar coverage now, because Web of Science has caught up significantly with Scopus and the coverage stakes. You use it for the same analyses. Some feel that Scopus is a little bit easier to use, or easier to correct issues through their contacts. And it's very important to know where to use the contact information to make any corrections that you need to do in these databases. And of course, they have another rather expensive, deeper analysis tool called SciVal that requires another subscription, and that's a benchmarking and deeper analysis tool. However, Scopus does provide free Scopus author profiles with citations information, and those can be accessed on the web. So let's take a look at some of these ones here. So we'll have a quick look at these metrics, but I want to leave some time for discussion. So I might just jump through these and leave you with the slides. I'm going to go through the different, the compare and contrast. some of the ones that we look at is, there's the Scopus free author profile. So you can see on that, there's an example for a Trinity researcher, and he's got lots more publications. He's an education social scientist. You can see his citations and his H indexes too. I happen to know that this researcher has a lot more, and I would tend to use Google Scholar for this researcher as an alternative. So, but you can get this information for free. Google Scholar, with its pros and cons, it's a black box. They won't give us an API for pulling down the information into our systems, but it's simple and easy to use, so long as you it's validated by individual researchers. The coverage is excellent, and they include books and book chapters. There are problems with errors and duplication, and that's why it has to be validated. And it provides bibliometric information. It can be validated, and you can download to RIS and BibTeX, and it's free. So we do use it quite a lot for arts, humanities, and social sciences in particular. And there's an example of a researcher in Dublin Business School and her metrics in individual author metrics in Google Scholar. Publish or Perish allows you to aggregate free desktop-based service that allows you to download up to a limit of 1,000 records. So it's very useful, especially for arts, humanities, and social sciences, and provides you with a full range of really interesting metrics as well. So Publish or Perish, that's it. Dimensions is the latest contender or competitor to Web of Science and Scopus. And it's a very large database. It's not curated. So it uses open citations, as many of the next ones do, and artificial intelligence to create this extremely large database. It includes data sets and clinical trials as well, along with some reports. And it includes funding information, but you have to pay for that section of Dimensions. So they've got a free version of it. That includes the metrics information on paywall data about open science, but the free version supports basic searches and simple analytics. And it has limited exports with the free version, but it has these very powerful artificial intelligence based analytics with the subscription version. So, and there's a free API for pulling the information into your own systems. So there's Dimensions, and it's linked. So huge numbers of records, you know, enormous numbers of patent searches as well. So compared with a very different type of tool to the Web of Science. Microsoft Academic Search is very similar. It has an enormous number of records in it. It employs, again, artificial intelligence, machine learning, semantic inference, and knowledge discovery. It's free, and it's worthwhile to take a look at that as well, especially if you don't have access to Web of Science and Scopus. And that's a look at that, using semantic searching with some of the huge figures of publications, authors, and so on that are covered by it. So, and the lens. Irena told me that you recently had a session on the lens, which I missed, and I'm really sad because I'm a huge partner of the lens. You'll see that lens.org has includes information from Microsoft Academic and uses Crossref, Open Citations Information, ORCID, PubMed, Impact Story. These are all their data partners, which makes it an incredibly valuable resource, and it's free. So I'll just give you a couple of screenshots of this, and you can please go back to the EIFL webinar on the lens.org. And if anybody's interested in discussing how to develop use cases for the lens further, I'd love to talk with you about it. So here's examples from the lens, doing an institution search. You can see all those lovely metrics appearing by the institution name, open access metrics as well. There's a scholarly analysis dashboard for an institution. You can do this for an author or for a group of authors, right? So, and you get these really nice metrics on publication counts, publication types, and you can even go in and look at the collaborations metrics. Who are the top collaborators, what are the top citing works, what are the top citing patents? So to me, the lens.org really is a game changer on the free tools area. And who are the top publishers for an institution, for example? So this is a brilliant tool for business intelligence as well. So there's a dashboard with the countries, the collaborating countries, for example. This could save a huge amount of time as well. So I recommend this. Again, very large database. It's not curated. It has a very extensive range of searches. When I say it's not curated, it's in this new generation of bibliometric tools that isn't using, journals don't have to submit to be included in it, like Web of Science and Scopus. They can, they're included automatically and filtered out. Some of the things you have to watch out for some of these is that you do tend to see predatory journals coming into them. So you really have to watch out and do quite a lot of filtering at the search level. So, but apart from that, you've got excellent resources here for free. And you can export in multiple formats of up to 50,000 records with a free REST API. So that's brilliant. I've got some compare and contrast here that I'm going to leave with you because you don't have time to go into them. On accessibility, I can see which ones, you've got some charts here that show you which are free and which are subscription only. And some of them are both, like dimensions. I've also got some, those are the free ones. On the coverage, which changes all the time. So that was whenever the last time, a couple of months ago when I did that. But you can see the coverage and the dates on that as well, comparing and contrasting those tools. And the functionality, so this would be looking at, can you apply these metrics by, are they simple or advanced? Can you apply them by at the author level, at the institution, the country, and benchmarking? And you certainly can. And I should have put, sorry, I have an error there that I need to fix, because Lens can certainly provide the country benchmarking as well. So, here's an overall view of the ownership, the coverage, and where to find those resources. So I've put down, check with your library. Some of you are the library, so you know where to find them. Some of them are free on the internet as well. And the same with altmetric tools, altmetric.com, Plumex, Kudos. You can get free versions on the web. And some of them have these subscription versions as well. So in terms of the where to find open research metrics and related tools, again, I have Impact Story, Google Analytics, repository statistics, open access publisher statistics, and then some of these databases come in with their version, usually using unpaywall data in the Web of Science, in Scopus, Dimensions. You'll find the breakdown by open access publications as well. But if you don't have a subscription, there are alternative sources to that you can see here. So, and this is about the application at the researcher level that I've given you an idea of already. So which tool should you use? Some of the main metrics that are provided by the different tools. You'll see which ones of these tools provide you with information on number of publications, number of citations, citations per paper, H-index, field-weighted impact, collaborations, benchmarking, economic indicators, and societal indicators. So depending on what you're looking for, you can decide on which tool you can use here. I'll add in Lens into that one as well, actually. And just in conclusion on the bibliometric tools, if you don't have a subscription, you have to do some more work, but actually might end up with some really good results that might even be better in terms of coverage than these subscription-based databases. Arguably, you should use the subscription ones and compare these big databases like Academic Search and the Lens and look at your results. So the options the alternative options are available now. You don't have to just use Web of Science and Scopus, and those options are getting better and they're multiplying. Oh, the Open Citations Initiative has been absolutely transformative and so has Crossref. So here's a view. If your subject is the individual researcher, you can use these tools. If it's an institution, you can use these tools. And if it's a research group, school or department, use publisher parish, possibly Dimensions and others. And don't forget to ask for a trial for commercial vendors, because you might not just use this as a one-off. Finally, choosing your metrics. Do apply the bibliometric rules, DORR and the Leiden principles. Use the metrics toolkit that I gave you. And if you want to know, if somebody comes to you and say, we want to allocate funding, what metrics should you use? 10 years old, but is Helen Hazel-Corns Assessing Europe's University-Based Research has a matrix in it that tells you the function, the kind of assessment that you want to do, and the sort of metrics and analysis that you should do, okay? So I'm going to leave you with that and say thank you very much for this, and we'll go to, and I've got links to, lots of links and lots of examples with the slides as well. So I'll stop sharing now. We'll check our chat. Okay,
Absolutely. There is a question in the chat, sir. It's actually the last one. I'll read it to you. Which of these platforms would you say is the most open, specifically in terms of whether or not they permit you to share a data set generated using the platform? I'm aware some do not allow that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's easy. The lens.org is, if you're taking that into account, then it's very new. It's not very well known, but it's easily the most open one, as you could see with all of the partners, you know. And then you could look at Microsoft Academic Search. Google Scholar will allow you to do a certain amount, but it won't, it's not open, you know, it's very much closed. And the other ones, the proprietary databases like Web of Science and Scopus, if you have a subscription, they'll allow you, so long as you cite the source, and that's reasonable, to produce reports of particular kinds, but you're not free to manipulate that information in the same way as you are with the others. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks a lot, sir. That was very comprehensive. I don't know why you say it's introduction. It wasn't introduction at all. It was exactly what we need to know when we work with bibliometrics data. And I don't see any other questions. And I guess one of the reasons is because you covered everything so well and provided a good practice advice. So let's maybe give another minute to people to add their questions.
I know I went through it quite quickly, so people might be kind of trying to take it all in. But if you came here with a particular concern, maybe you've got a job to do that somebody's asked you to do, or an experience where you use particular tools, or maybe there's something you'd like me to go back over, I'd be glad to do that.
And you can also raise your hand and we'll let you speak if typing isn't convenient for you. Theodosia, just a second, sir.
What I can do, if people don't have any questions.
Theodosia raised her hand. So if you unmute yourself, Theodosia, you should be able to speak.
Irina, thank you very much. And thank you very much to the presenter. But this question is to you, Irina. I wanted to find out if EIFL would be willing to negotiate a subscription for Dimensions for the EIFL countries, because the free version is not enough. I don't know, just a question.
Yeah, we had some talks with Dimensions, and I think we as EIFL will be interested, and Rima is on the call. I'm checking. Fortunately, Romy isn't on the call. Would you like to add anything on that, Rima?
Can I ask? And I add in something while Rima is joining us. I've been working with Dimensions recently and going back to them again, and they've improved. So Theodosia, I think that's a really great question. You know, I'd love to see that. My understanding is that Dimensions, they're offering quite a lot of free stuff, you know. So but for me, my institution does not have a subscription to Dimensions. I'm getting to the stage where I feel that they really, you know, institutions that are research intensive and really want to understand that they really do need this, I think, if they can provide the funding, because it provides that information about the research grant information as well as the bibliometric information. So it's kind of all in one, and they do allow you to integrate it within the local system. So we're looking at the moment to try and see if we can get a subscription to it. So I'd be really interested to know if EIFL succeeds in this.
Yes, we were in touch with them, as Irina mentioned, and I don't remember now exactly why we stopped.
I think there wasn't much interest from countries back then, but that was 2 or 3 years ago when we talked.
Yeah, we can go back.
Yeah, it's changed a lot, you know, in the last 2 years, because I was just looking at it there, and and you know what's really interesting is that they're providing quite an interesting view of the Sustainable Development Goals, you know, that they're bringing that in. Now, obviously, it's all based on machine learning, so on the ground, I think it would be a really useful thing for EIFL countries to actually look at that data and see, does that match up with what they would understand to be the experience on the ground of alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So, and that could be a really valuable input that the EIFL countries could make to this whole scene, you know, to making it better.
We are also in conversation, and I would be curious to hear from you, Niamh, with the site, a tool that is focused smart citations.
Right. Okay. So that's not one that I've used particularly, and I haven't. So I have come across that. All right. So that's relatively new. I looked at it and decided not to include it in this one. So that's subscription as well, right? And that's using, it's quite a big database as far as I remember.
There is a free version for
Yeah.
researchers with limited functionality.
But it's
That's
under development, and they just recently launched institutional level and lots of new things.
Yeah, that's right. I looked at it a little while back and saw that it wasn't fully formed, but I'd be very interested to see if you do negotiate something with them to see how you can actually, you know, sort of put it into operation. My experiences, for what it's worth, with working with the new resources is that it really needs a kind of a group to come together to examine the data and make sure that it works properly for each of the institutions. We found that with Insights when they launched, with SciVal when they launched, and it's going to be the same with the site as well.
Please, Theodosia.
Yeah, but again, something that I think that EIFL would be very well placed to organize if you did get a subscription to one of these kind of resources, whether it's Dimensions or a site or any other one, that you could workshop it and get feedback and look at, with people's knowledge, the kind of knowledge that people here today have of their research on the ground, to make sure that their institutions are properly covered and that their authors are properly covered. Because we found there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done with them.
Yeah, we'll keep you informed.
Brilliant, that's great.
And please, Theodosia. Or is your hand still raised from the previous time? And you might need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, this is another question. Thank you. You've given us a flood of information. That's a lot of work for us to go back and look at the different sources you've referred us to. And we are very grateful. But I would be grateful if you could also point us to specific tutorials, because this is just kind of an overview. So if you could lead us to tutorials, yes, that could help. That would be useful. Thank you.
So if I can just go into the tutorials at the very beginning of the session, and this, I don't know if you got the chance to look at these, Theodosia, I'm sure you didn't, you were probably very busy. I'll just share my screen again and I'll go into this. So I'll just go back. Oops. Okay, let's go back up to the beginning of this again. So it's a bit slow. Come on. So some of the resources that have been identified, Theodosia, I don't know if you got the chance to look at these, but here's some examples of online courses on bibliometric basics and on traditional metrics. I'll also be releasing open educational resource that has aspects of bibliometrics training, and sometime during the summer I'll let Irena know when that's available, and that will be released on a CC BY license, so you can use bits of it yourself and take it if you want to. There's resources and videos and so on. So I'm recommending these resources here for the online courses, and then also, Theodosio, just go out of this here. So
Niamh, we don't see your screen.
I beg your pardon, I'm so sorry. Let's go into this again. I must have done it too quickly. Share my screen. Okay, right. I'm hoping you're seeing it now.
Yes, and I put the links in the chat.
Brilliant. That's really great. So EIFL have already, within this wonderful resource that they've created, which is the EIFL Digital Research Literacy Training Online, they've broken it down. So they've got the online courses up front, and then the LibGuides, and then the examples of presentations that you can use for training. I've thrown in a few more. So that's what I mean. Those are some online courses that are highly recommended. And also out from my own institution, we've just developed a open education resource that we're making fair at the moment, and we'll be making it openly accessible and reusable under a CC BY license. And that's called Research Integrity and Impact in an Open Scholarship Era. So the final section 5 of that. Section 4 and 5 are about research evaluation and research, and how individual researchers can manage their own research. So I'll let Irena know as soon as that's available, and then I'd be really interested in any feedback that I get from that too. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Niamh. And I know that you need to run to your own training for early career researchers. So thank you so much.
Really sorry, I'm going off to train a few early career researchers now with my HR department. So putting some of this sort of stuff into action.